It's 9:15 in the morning of April 14th, 1988. This man enters a tech store desperate to buy servers. He needed 8 servers and fast.
I need 8 of them fast.
Servers were a thing that any entrepreneur had to buy. There was no platform as a service, no AWS. You had to build your own servers, and they were expensive. It's all on the line for him. His job, the company he works for, and the future of streaming as we know it today depends on this server purchase. He bolts back to his office. It's small and it's dirty. There are pizza boxes all over the floor. The furniture is just foldable chairs and one table. And in it, there's a small staff of worn out employees, including these 2 guys, desperate for these servers. He plugs the servers, boom, website back online, but only for about 45 minutes. And then it crashes again because hundreds of people are ordering their products and the staff is barely able to keep up with demand. It's a race, but now in the end, they somehow live through the first day. And it's a hit. This chaotic, small company with seemingly no heading and not even the right equipment is called Netflix. And that desperate scramble to survive is not going to be the last. It's a sign of things to come. Netflix would change our lives, but it also laid out the groundwork for its own doom. And to think that for a while we were in love with Netflix because it had all the shows, all the movies, it was cheap and easy to use, it redefined binge watching for an entire generation. And today, it's struggling to stay alive in the very market that it created, even after reaching 191 countries. That's a company forensic story. So it's this common myth that the idea for Netflix came after Reed Hastings got a $40 fine from Blockbuster for not returning a VHS on time.
Well, this is the last time I rent here.
You'll be missed.
That's not quite true. The idea actually came when founders Mark Randolph and Reed Hastings realized that they would soon be jobless. Mark wanted to start anything in e-commerce, so he pitched idea after idea from custom surfboards to pet products. But Reed rejected all of them, and he had to be on board. He was the one bringing the first check. Selling things on the internet made perfect sense, and even back then in the mid-90s, it showed a lot from the founders. They wanted to be ahead of everyone. Here's where the VHS comes in, and it's this guy, of course, Blockbuster. Blockbuster was dominating VHS at the time, so Mark and Reed came up with this other idea. What if they rented something else, something small and portable, as a CD?
Have you seen this?
This is DVD.
And the two had heard about this new technology from Japan, where you could fit an entire feature film in a single disc at this stunning 480p resolution. It was incredible, unprecedented, of course, the future. So in 1997, the two founded Netflix with this name, and the core business was renting and selling DVDs through a website and then mailing them to customers.
Go to Netflix.com, make a list of the movies you want to see, and in about 1 business day, you'll get 3 DVDs.
Hastings brought the cash and Randolph ran the ship. And from the start, they needed as much content as possible. They bought thousands of DVDs, and so they effectively began to shape history.
Why, Jimmy? Why are you still not renting your movies from the Netflix?
That's Paulie, of course, from The Sopranos.
The boss and his family told you you're going to be Santa Claus. You're Santa Claus.
Supporting Netflix. That's the quality of content that Netflix had at one point. But getting to this point was a rocky journey. Staying there was even harder, even if that first month crashed their servers. So much so that this guy, of course, wanted it. Around August 98, Jeff Bezos offered to buy Netflix. To him, this company made perfect sense. He would implement the business model into Amazon instead of starting from scratch. But the two founders rejected the deal.
No.
After all, Netflix had much more potential than that. The problem was that rejecting this deal was about much more than just money.
All you care about is money. This town, it deserves a better class of criminal.
Sure, by 99, Netflix already had 240,000 subscribers and a lot of promise, but in reality, Netflix wasn't really special at the time. Its business model was very easy to replicate. There was no moat around them. Any company could just copy them. Plus, they weren't working as well. Netflix wanted to rent DVDs, but 95% of their income actually came from selling DVDs. So the founders sold that part of the business to Amazon in exchange for some customers. Amazon customers who wanted to rent DVDs could go on Netflix, and the Netflix users who wanted to buy DVDs could go and get them on Amazon.
I don't know. That's a good question.
It made some sense, but it's definitely a risky move. But it proved that Netflix wasn't afraid to pivot their business model. The problem is that the next ideas weren't really great. They partnered with DVD companies to offer free memberships with every DVD player purchase. The companies were printing the code outside the box, so people just stole it, claimed the free DVDs, and never even subscribed to Netflix. And then they tried renting the Clinton trial, but that ended up shipping porn to many customers instead of the real thing.
I am gonna kill Bill.
And then one day, just Hastings had enough. He created this PowerPoint and explained slide by slide why Randolph had to stop being CEO. And he could have used Slidebean, but I was only like 10 years old then. Randolph finally declared defeat, and in 99, Hastings stepped in as CEO. And still, Randolph had one ace up his sleeve.
Great vengeance and furious anger.
He came up with this brilliant idea to pay a monthly fee to get DVDs and change them whenever you wanted. And to help this idea, Netflix reinforced their algorithm and their rating systems. And all these ideas came at a pretty good time to make Netflix this appetizing sale. And it was about to become vital. Because of course, after 2001, funding for any .com company was as dry as desert. Nobody wanted anything to do with the internet. And meanwhile, Netflix was trudging along with an expected $5 million in revenue. I mean, that's a lot depending on what stage you're in. But here's Blockbuster. Spoiler alert, of course, we're looking at this critical point in history. But let's keep in mind one thing. Blockbuster didn't believe in the internet. So Netflix suddenly found themselves with the upper hand. The desperate co-founders came up with an offer. So no sale, only an embarrassment. Netflix then took harsh actions. They streamlined the company, they fired employees, and they created this working culture that's relentless even to this day. Plus, they needed cash, so they went through with their IPO. And by the way, buying up Netflix stock would have been an amazing deal even today. With fresh cash on the hand, it was time to up their game. And this subscription-based model was working, but Blockbuster was hot on their tails. And the two companies went at it at this battle of failed products. But hold on to that last one just for a while. For the moment, it's all about the battle between the established giant and this up-and-coming company. Netflix decided on one thing, that they wouldn't expand. Instead, they would focus only on rentals. Plus, with that vision that they always had, they knew that just as VHS would die, DVDs would eventually die as well.
We're friends to the end, remember?
This is the end, friend.
And meanwhile, they were still growing. And most importantly, in 2006, they had their first profitable year. And then in 2007 came their next brilliant move. It was time to go global through the web. Canada was the first trial country to do this. This one moment in history marked the beginning of a new era in television. The era of streaming had begun. And all of that thanks to this pivot by Netflix, even though they would eventually shoot themselves in the foot. But back then, they were the only name in the game. Plus, they landed deals with major distributors, so they had all the major hit movies and series all on this single one platform. Netflix was becoming the platform that we fell in love with. But then this happened.
People cancelled their subscriptions.
Netflix announced it was still losing subscribers.
We're not in 2022 yet. This is 2011. 800,000 subscribers were gone in just 3 months. And it's all in Netflix's essence. Ever since the platform began, they've faced these crossroads. And for a while, it has seemed to manage things well. Streaming was no different. Hastings had done a good job, but he'd make one big mistake. He wanted to rush this split between DVDs and streaming. So he created an entire new company. Netflix was the streaming platform and Quickster was the DVDs platform, but that would fail miserably. Though many of the streaming subscribers only had streaming, most of the DVD renting subscribers had both services, and now those customers had to pay more for a service that was worse. People were pissed off and 800,000 people left. The outlook was not looking good, so a desperate Hastings took desperate measures such as hiking the price.
Strategy is making hard choices.
And again, this is not 2022.
It's just become the world's first time traveler.
This is 2011, and fortunately for Netflix, they had one good thing coming, because Netflix seemed to bounce back from this Quickster dilemma in no time. By 2012, Netflix had grown to over 30 million subscribers, and things were going great. And it was then that they knew that they had to take more action. And that's where this guy comes in. You probably have not heard of him, but he is responsible for some major shows. Hastings gave him one single task: to find the next great show and to have Netflix produce it. He scoured the world and found Lilyhammer, a critically acclaimed but moderately successful series.
The 10th anniversary of Lilyhammer means it's the 10th anniversary of Netflix original content because it was our very first original series on Netflix.
It wasn't expensive to make and drew some viewers, but it just wasn't enough. And then Sarandos found this one.
This is going to be a big year for us.
House of Cards had all the markings of a great TV show, with one catch: it would cost $100 million to produce.
There is but one rule: hunt or be hunted.
For House of Cards to make financial sense, Netflix would have to grab 500,000 subscribers per year and to retain them for at least 2 years on the backbone of this show. And after the show had premiered, this is what happened.
Netflix watchers, there are a lot of you, there are a lot of me and Mike Apple too.
9 Emmy nominations for House of Cards. The first time online television series has been nominated.
And then the series swept all of the awards and ceremonies for years. And that's not the most impressive statistic. Here's Netflix international expansion. And international expansion was vital for this company. With it, they could offer more content to more viewers all over the world. And from that first expansion, Netflix wouldn't stop, and many of its international shows became staples. The international markets haven't slowed down, making up for 57% of Netflix's income, which is an exception for a US-based company. Netflix was now a powerhouse. One award ceremony in particular helped shift the tide and prove that Netflix was here to stay.
Today, right now, you are witnessing the birth of a global TV network.
In the 2018 Emmys, Netflix broke a streak that started back when Netflix hadn't even thought of creating its own content. That year, Netflix had the most Emmy nominations and displaced HBO as the king. For 17 years, HBO had ruled the Emmys with incredible television, and now the once frail DVD rental company had taken over. Plus, Netflix also had a firm grasp on viewership.
Relax, it's a lighter.
They had it all. They had the best shows, the best movies, and there was not a single hint of competition in the streaming market. That's the main office, but there's nobody in there. I'm assuming they're working from home, but it looks quite deserted. Netflix was responsible for 15% of the world's internet traffic. They did incredibly well during the pandemic. They were on top of the world until this happened.
Streaming giant Netflix suffered its biggest stock loss in nearly 2 decades.
It's a disaster for anybody who owned it at this point.
Netflix lost subscribers. Changes are on the way.
The news caused this. Netflix, like many other companies, relied on its stock for cash. If the stock dropped in value, as it did right here, Netflix suddenly had less money to work with, therefore creating worse content, therefore dropping quality, and so forth. It's like this snowball effect. But what caused this? It's not a dumb move by Hastings this time. We actually need to dive deeper. This is how many streaming services existed in the world in 2013 when Netflix released House of Cards and watching stuff with Kevin Spacey was socially acceptable. And this is how many streaming services we have in 2022 with at least 100,000 subscribers. Among these, you of course can find HBO, Paramount Plus, Peacock, all of which own content that they used to license to Netflix and no longer do. These hits were the main drivers of viewership, and losing them meant users ditched the Netflix wagon. Forget about loyalty. It's all about the entertainment. It's all about watching the shows that you like. And then there's quality. Don't get me wrong. Some shows are good, but there is a reason behind this bit. Netflix began a crusade to have as much content as possible.
Netflix, you're greenlit. Who am I speaking with?
Yes, hello. We have an idea for a show that we think would be great for Netflix.
Okay, great. Would you like a pilot or just go straight to an order of 6 episodes?
In 2021 alone, Netflix invested $17 billion in original productions, some great and some not so much. And it's easy to find yourself spending hours scrolling through Netflix to find something that's worth watching. It's as though Reed Hastings' original promise of quality over quantity and focusing on one thing at a time is suddenly gone. Meanwhile, the competition is of course working hard on creating good shows with a lot more money. And so not only do viewers now have more choices when it comes to platforms, but also when it comes to shows. Netflix fought back in 2022. Stranger Things was an incredible pop culture phenomenon, and a little bit by accident. They've always believed in this premise of this binge-watchable full season releases. But by releasing Stranger Things with a 1-month season break, that changed their landscape completely.
Dear Billy, I don't know if you can even hear this.
I don't have my powers.
Suddenly, audiences were all in sync, together at the same time, and they had room to theorize, to make memes, to enjoy the community experience of watching a show. And this is the old model, the model that had worked forever, the model that made shows like Lost or Breaking Bad so successful, and it did wonders for how we experienced Stranger Things in 2022. But that's just one outlier.
Slipping Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun.
Walk away. That's right, Howard. You know why I didn't take the job? Because it's too small!
Better Call Saul was another one. While originally named C-Series, and they also have a dedicated streaming service, Netflix negotiated distribution rights for outside the US, where there's no AMC+. If you're in the US, Better Call Saul is an AMC series, but outside the US, it's a series by Netflix. Their incredible finale might have worked to make people fall back in love with the platform, at least outside the US, but the reality is that Netflix didn't make this. which of course means they could lose distribution rights at some point, and more importantly, they don't really own or understand the talent needed to replicate it. So with a few exceptions like these, Netflix content feels more and more generic, more low budget, more templated, and they've been forced to cancel many of the shows that were left with cliffhangers, upsetting fans even more. And the drop in the stock price created a cascade effect, less money to pass around, forcing them to make bad decisions under a lot of pressure, and some of those decisions obviously seem flawed. Remember Blockbuster's bankruptcy in 2010? They had to go through some desperate measures to stay on top of their game. They had to up their subscriptions, they had to charge more to customers when they didn't rewind their VHS. And all these were considered predatory and desperate moves. In 2017, Netflix made this announcement.
In today's Tech Bites, cracking down on sharing passwords.
You're borrowing your Netflix password from a buddy.
And with some logic, after all, in the US, 1 out of every 3 accounts had shared passwords outside of their homes. And as part of these desperate moves to regain some stability, Hastings announced that the company would start charging for passwords outside the household. And then we're back in the past. Netflix all of a sudden began to behave a little bit like Blockbuster. And after all, no other streaming service has even tried to block password sharing, and they're probably not going to after seeing how people reacted to Netflix. The announcement came at the same time when Netflix had announced that it had lost 1 million subscribers. And you know it's bad when you have to celebrate that you only lost 1 million subscribers versus the 2 that you had expected to lose. The Russian invasion of Ukraine had an impact here since Netflix had to cease services in Russia, leading to an additional 700,000 subscribers lost. Also, Netflix was of course famous for not having ads, and then they announced lower price tiers with ads. And of course, this news doesn't sit well with people. And then came layoffs, which scares investors even more. Stock price keeps dropping, snowball effect, and it all gets even worse. And this raises an even bigger question. All of these streaming services are competing for our attention, and that's even without considering the time that we spent now on social media, which is increasing after the rise of TikTok. Netflix is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the dangerous future that all of these streamers face. The competition is tough, and our attention is limited. There's only so many hours that we can spend consuming content. And one of the few advantages left for Netflix is their superior AI system that could become the driving force behind their next pivot. After all, this might be what the future holds for Netflix. This quote came from Mitchell Hurwitz. He created Arrested Development and is currently a writer for Netflix. And it certainly sounds scary, moving Netflix closer to those other companies that want to know everything about you, which, by the way, we're going to cover in our next video about the death of privacy. But will knowing everything be enough for the company to overcome the fact that it's losing its relevance? The competition will only get tougher, and in the past, Hastings had a way to see a future and to pivot. And now it seems that they might have lost their ability to predict the next big thing. Unless it's gaming. Since late 2021, Netflix applied the same recipe that made great movies with video games. The company hired developers and then started filling some of their gaps with games, some even based on their massive hits. But the world is sort of split on whether they're actually good or not. And after all, this is a very expensive bet. They spent $70 million on the Stranger Things Season 3 game alone, and the numbers weren't great. There are about 1.7 million daily users, and you might think that's a lot, but it's not even 1% of Netflix's total subscriber base. However, this doesn't mean that it's a total failure. The past might be repeating itself. When Blockbuster was the giant, Netflix had but a fraction of the revenue of its gigantic competitor. The same happens now, only within Netflix. Gaming is a fraction of the company's entire revenue, and maybe it could grow. It just needs to find that one major success and run with it. And we know that Netflix can do it. In the meantime, one thing that we are going to have to accept, one thing that we're going to have to deal with is that for now, we're back to cable.